This is the Art Zone.
This is the video document Art Zone, a profile of art and artists in the Rockford area. In this episode, we'll experience on the video front through the lens of TV Esperanto's spy cameras. View a selection from Brian Beumer's Angel Head 2. And we'll see an in-depth profile of photographer Stephen Pitkin.
Hi, I'm Doc Slavkowski, and this is the Art Zone. We're coming to you from J.R. Kortman Center for Design downtown in the heart of Rockford's cultural district. The artist can express himself in many ways, and Stephen Pitkin is one who does just that. Commercially, he's an advertising photographer who extends his craft to fine art, sculpture, and even rock and roll. The Art Zone will visit his spacious downtown studio, which is truly a hub of creative activity. We'll also see segments of video art from Seattle-based filmmaker Brian Beumer, whose work was submitted to the Art Zone by Scott Snyder, registrar at the Rockford Art Museum. Speaking of video art, on the video front was a multi-screen interactive video art installation produced at Cafe Esperanto during On the Waterfront Festival. The presentation was produced by Doug Connell in association with TV Esperanto, and since I represent TV Esperanto, I was interviewed by Dennis Horton for the Art Zone. By the way, special thanks to WRAX-TV who contributed to this multimedia report.
For the past 2 years, patrons at On Waterfront have had an extraordinary view of the events that take place during the festival. Some planned, some not, and this year was no exception. In fact, this year, they not only were able to see what took place, they were able to take part in getting it all on tape. With me now is Doc Slavkowski, who is the director, art director, executive director, co-producer, somebody.
Co-producer and gallery director.
Here at Cafe Esperanto to talk a little bit about what took place over the 3-day period. Doc, let's go back to the beginning and find out exactly what it is you did to come up with On the Video Front.
Okay, this was actually a concept developed by Doug Connell, who works for the Art Zone and is the co-producer with Carbon Productions and TV Esperanto, putting this thing together. And what it involved was a multi-screen interactive video art installation. And how it was different from the past year is the fact that the video, we had hands-on access to the video monitors, so people could actually control which view they saw in the respective monitors. We even had a thing called Spy Cam, which you could control the camera. It was like a robotic pivoting pedestal, and you could actually follow people, kind of like David Letterman does on his show. And that was real fun. People really got a chance to sort of zoom in on people doing some unusual things, and it just made you feel more a part of the video presentation. And it was a way of looking at the festival from an entirely different perspective, you know, seeing it a little bit detached from it, but still being right in the middle of it.
You've done this for 2 years, and this is the first time that you've captured live on camera all of these things. What's the process that's necessary to get this all done?
Okay, that's very difficult in the sense that there's miles and miles, or it seems like miles and miles of cable to hook the whole thing up. We had a thing called Skycam, and that was a live camera which was on top of the Kinko building, and that gave us a vantage point from Wyman Street and State Street Bridge, actually all the way across the river. We could also shoot off to the country stage, and then we had the pivoting camera was on the roof of the Hughes building right next door. Then we had another camera called Bar Cam, which was down in the window downstairs, and you could get a view of the festival from a bartender's point of view. So you saw over the bartender's shoulder and him, you know, making the beers and handing them over. So you got sometimes there were intimate views of things, you know, really close-up shots, and you could watch without, you know, having any people totally unaware. And then the overall views gave you a general idea of what was going on in the festival, and you could keep up with the crowds that way.
Well, how was the whole thing received by the people who came in and took part?
Well, you know, people really enjoyed it, and I think, you know, there's something about television. I think people are real comfortable with television and being able to view something from a television screen, something that they're participating in. So they can come in here and kind of see it in a different light and also have control over it. And I think that was the most fun part of it that people really enjoyed, was being able to sort of be the director for a while.
What's the most unusual thing in 3 days that you were able to capture with all these 3 cameras?
Well, one thing, we caught a fight, I mean, literally a physical fist fight with a couple and their friends trying to break it up. And then also people scratching themselves in the wrong places, and things like, people eating corn on the cob makes really great video, especially if they're unaware that they're being watched. So there were a lot of like the little things that we normally do see, but you can't really stop and stare at when you're, participating on the street in the festival. But up here you can, like sort of zone in on it. So that was real fun.
You went another step this year with live cameras. Here's one, I'll put you on the spot. What are you going to do next year?
We had talked about doing something like doing a camera from a balloon or something, so you would get a really like bird's eye view, because that's something that nobody really does get a chance to see unless you're, like the helicopters are always flying around the festival, and that would be a neat thing to do. But we have a little problem with the cord, but I think it could be arranged. We'll have to talk to Doug about that.
Doc, not only were people who were here in the cafe able to see and take part in on the video front, but people who were at home who either for one reason or another didn't get down to the festival or come up to the cafe were able to see it by virtue of local media. How did that all come about?
Well, it's sort of interesting because we sent out press releases to explain about the event, and WRX-TV came and covered the event. And what was sort of interesting is this was a media event being covered by a media event, and that made it sort of weird because we were actually having people tape us shooting other people, and then we actually had someone else shooting us for the Art Zone. So there were like 3 layers of media going on here at one time.
So I guess what we had here was a multimedia presentation, and in fact, you're going to get a chance to see it in case you missed it over the weekend.
Welcome back to On the Waterfront. For several, On the Waterfront means joining in all the activities, but we found others who decided to take a back seat, enjoy a cup of coffee, and get involved with this year's festival without venturing outside. Serena Fazan joins us live to explain. Serena.
Well, Bill, most people have heard of interactive TV. It's when the viewer can actually control what they see. Well, interactive TV has found another home right here on the waterfront.
These people came to this cafe on the waterfront to watch television, but these are no ordinary TVs. These are modern interactive magnets that allow you to control whatever you want to see.
To be able to sit up here and see it through the eyes of a camera, it focuses your attention in entirely different ways.
Obviously, there is a lot going on with interactive TV, scanning the festival, enjoying the sights over a leisurely cup of coffee. But what interactive TV really seems to do is bring out the little devil in all of us.
Spying.
Do you think that people in their hearts like to spy?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Why do you like to spy on people?
It's just a fun thing to do. You can just sit up here and be in air conditioning and just spy on people and watch them do silly things.
We decided to experiment and see if people minded being televised without even knowing it. As you might imagine, anonymous camera work doesn't go over very well.
You were both just on TV.
We were.
How do you feel about that?
I don't like it.
Do you mind being on TV?
I suppose if I didn't know it.
Although this seems like a lot of fun, there was one question we couldn't help but asking.
Is it illegal?
No, it's not illegal at all. So, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, if it was illegal, a lot of people would be in prison. And Bill, organizers tell us that thousands have literally scanned and spied on the festival. It is free at Cafe Esperanto. By the way, owners say stop by and have a look for yourself. Reporting live from On the Waterfront, Serena Fazan 13, Eyewitness News. Bill, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Serena, for that live report on interactive spy cam here at the waterfront.
this is the Art Zone. We're coming from the Pitkin studio, and we're on the near west side of downtown Rockford. And we're in your studio where you work not only as an artist, but also as an advertising photographer. Steve, tell us about your show, though, that's at the Kortman Gallery, entitled Some Future Black and White. Is that correct on the title?
Yeah, that's the title. I presume that there'll be some video of the show as well, so I don't have to describe everything.
No.
But at any rate, the show is primarily a show of photography, a couple of sculptural pieces there as well. And because I do a lot of work with a mixture of artistic forms, both sculpture and photography, traditional types of photography, some not so traditional types of photography, and I even do a little artistic fooling around with some music. And I think as an artist we can do a variety of crafts, a variety of techniques with our craft, and put a lot of different things together and achieve a lot of powerful results by mixing the techniques in which we work. And I think a lot of it has to do with more of our concept about what it is we're trying to portray in our work than necessarily exactly what type of work we do.
Tell us about the photography. You photographed for Smithsonian Magazine, did you do work? And
Yeah. Well, it's because of my roles at the Time Museum and Seth Atwood requesting that I do photography at the Time Museum that I do photography at all. I never really considered photography originally as a very exciting art medium to be pursued. And he came along one day and said, Steve, I'd like you to learn how to do photography so that we can do this series of catalogs in the collection.
well, another sort of commercial artistic area that you worked in was the Rick Nielsen guitar book.
Yeah. Well, and because of the work that I had done at the Time Museum, I had quite a bit of experience in the production of books. And so Rick had an associate from out of town come to him and make a proposal that they do a guitar book together. And Rick said, yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I'd love to do a guitar book, but guess what? I've got some friends right here in town, Steve Pitkin and Mike Graham, who can do the photography. And Bill's like, who the heck are those guys? So Rick brought Bill down here. We had a review. He looked at our stuff, and Bill agreed that we might participate in the project. So that was a great thrill. It was truly a great thrill. I mean, we had the greatest collection of guitars here imaginable with Rick.
And that was all shot in this space here.
Yeah, right. The whole place was just packed with guitars. It was great. It was one of those fun projects where, you know, we spent all-nighters for about 2 weeks and crashed through the whole thing and did the entire project in about 2 weeks.
Well, let's talk about the space, though, because
Yeah.
that's just being here and being in this environment, it really does seem conducive to creativity. And this is nice of us for the Art Zone to be in the artist space, because a lot of times we don't have the opportunity to do that. But tell us a little bit about this building, and do you feel like just the fact that even that you're downtown, that helps, just being...
Well, I think that helps because I think a building like this is easily overlooked in our community, which is a good thing for me because I wanted to find a place like this. It's a bad thing in some ways because buildings like this are being allowed to fall apart and be destroyed. And it's a simple place. I mean, it's just a big brick building, simple structure, but it's big and open and clean. And there's some other... We had there's a bug in here. We had a heck of a job deciding what parts of the original structure to leave alone and what parts needed to be cleaned up, so to speak. We tried to leave the beams exposed and all that kind of stuff.
It has a sort of a loft, but also studio feeling. I mean, you do feel like you're in a creative environment here.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important for us, obviously, to be in a creative place. It's also valuable to the people who we work with to come down here and feel as though we are in a creative place, because then they think that, of course, it's absolutely true, that they're getting people who do creative work. Of course it's true.
Every commercial photographer should have an eye, and most of them don't. So you get someone like Pitkin, he stands out because he he has an art eye. And so when I look at what he's done here, I don't see that as all that different from what he does down there at the studio day to day, except for maybe a couple of sort of frames that he's learning how to weld.
A lot of people are all turned on about the framing and not really, well, that's part of the deal. I mean, that's the thing that initiates a conversation between the art piece and the person viewing it. And I mean, the framing is something a lot of people haven't seen done before, that type of framing. It's substantial, it's meaty, it's weighty. The color tones and the texture. I mean, a black and white print is effectively a metal emulsion on paper. And when you look at those metal frames, they're like raw metal frames. These two things have a realistic relationship in their raw chemistry, as well as in their appearance. Well, one of the things with the photography that is in that show that you can go see is that the photography in particular, my objective is to use the skills and craft that I have as a photographer to communicate the imagery that I want to communicate, but then in turn to put it all together as a piece of art which is more of an object and less of a flat picture. The commercial work that we do is almost 100%. I mean, there are very few exceptions, and there really are some, but almost 100% of the work that we produce in the commercial photography world is flat, two-dimensional stuff that has no surface texture, it has no life beyond the piece of paper that it's printed on. And I think a lot of photography really suffers in its being held at that level exclusively. The picture itself, I mean the photo image, is actually an emulsion on the paper. The paper is just carrying the good stuff that makes the image happen.
And that also relates the pieces then to the sculpture, because you had three sculptural pieces in the show.
Yeah.
And the one was, what was the materials used? The one with the arrow and...
Well, the big spear-shaped thing, I don't know what that is. It's a found object that a friend gave to me once. And then the stone is actually limestone, windowsill cuts and stuff that I assembled as a kind of a pedestal to support that thing. It has a sort of a human figure relationship in its basic appearance and presence. The other sculptural piece, which is tucked away down by the bathroom, is wooden timbers that have been carved and painted, and it's all a mathematic formula. It all has to do with the highly refined concept of the perfect, so to speak, the perfect ratio and proportion in composition. And it's up to us to decide whether we believe in that or not, but of course the piece reflects those relationships and ratios mathematically.
The other sculptural piece is the one that resembles a clock piece or clock movement. Explain that.
Galileo's timer. Galileo, there's a fun old story about, actually those pieces are parts of antique French clocks, but they're not used in their proper sense. The little bit that actually acts as a pendulum is not a pendulum piece, even though it suits the purpose real well.
The other piece in the show that is probably the most controversial piece is the one that has the word suicide embedded into the framework.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah. We got light, yeah. The homogenized, civilized quad scene. Pieces yourselves are very interesting. I really like the one over there with the message, homogenized, civilized, suicide. Seems to be consistent with a lot of my own beliefs, so it really caught my eye.
Tell us about that.
Well, if you read the other little bits of words that are imprinted in the paper along with the photo images, it says civilize and homogenize, and it shows little pictures, very small Polaroid transfers of ethnographic sculptures. And let's see, the one in the upper left came from Bali, and it's a little shadow puppet figure, and it's a super wild, kind of a crazy perhaps a religious figure. And the one in the upper right-hand corner came from New Guinea, and it represents an ancestral figure. And these pieces both come from cultures that have very established religious and cultural heritage, and they have rules and regulations so that their society, as a small entity, survives for thousands and thousands of years. People get along well, they have rules, and the society works. And then the two little figures at the bottom are actually from the Philippines, and they're Christian missionary carvings. And what this piece is really all about is that we, as Western civilization, through our missionaries, move in on these little cultures here, there, and everywhere around the world, and impose our new theology and our new values upon these other cultures. We civilize them, and we homogenize our ideas with those other cultures. And we do that in a way that's in some ways very similar to the ways that those cultures work. So we take advantage of what already works for them, and we use that for our major approach in civilizing, quote unquote, these other cultures. And my view is that that's a very dangerous thing that we do. Subsequently, the title suicide.
So it's it's almost like becomes self-destructive?
Yeah, self-annihilating, I think.
Their acceptance?
Their acceptance of us, I think, is dangerous for them, and I think that our imposing our own values and cultural mores and systems on other people is dangerous for the whole human race. I think that for us to have an objective of civilizing, but in Western terms, of the entire world, isn't a good thing, necessarily. There are parts, of course, that are, but...
What's it like having an artist for a father?
It's normal to me. I've grown up with it.
Yeah, yeah. And did you help out at all with the art?
Sometimes I do.
And how does it feel to come up and see a show and like just work on the wall and people commenting on it?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, this building obviously has some space in it, and you know, later in the evening on a weeknight, we can make as much noise here without offending anybody that I know of, anyway. So it's a perfect spot for us to have rehearsal.
Now tell us about Ad Band now.
Well, Ad Band is a funny thing. A guy named Rick Wells, who writes music commercially, decided that what he needed to do was to put together a bunch of people who are involved in advertising to make up a little goofy music band and get up in front of an advertising crowd and kind of jerk around and be stupid, and everybody could laugh. We'd have some fun. And so he got Jay Graham, Scott Johnson, Mike Graham, and myself together, as well as himself, to start this little rehearsal. And there's another bug. Oh no. And so we started our rehearsals, and before you knew it, we were closet guitarists as kids. I mean, we all played music and had a great time as kids with our music. And when Rick pulled us out of the closet, I don't think he realized what kind of a monster he unleashed, because we all immediately had to go out and buy new equipment, new guitars, amplifiers that would break any window in town, and you know, we really got going on this whole thing. And before you knew it, we were rehearsing regularly, And the poor guy, who was the only professional musician in the group, couldn't make all the rehearsals. We had to fire him. So all us amateurs kick out the good guy. But we really do have a great time.
And you play gigs. I mean, you do
we
things.
play around town.
There are not a lot of people in this world that are able to have their creative life also be a part of their living. How does that feel?
Well, I don't know that that's unique because it's been something that I've always tried to do, if not actually done. And I think it's really something that people must do, because if they think about certain things on a regular basis, and that's their primary focus in life, I think it's only obvious that they should try to make a living at that. Whether it be baseball or the creation of art objects or playing music or doing photography or anything else you could imagine possible for people to do. Some things are perceived to be more creative than others, and I'm not sure that I believe that's true. I think we all have certain gifts and talents that we can pursue and excel in. I think one of the problems that I've always had is not being able to pick which one I prefer, and that's why it's lucky for me to have this little hobby band that we play with, and it's lucky for me to be able to do a show like I just did with you at Kortman's, because there are those other things that I think I should be doing too.
Art for art's sake. Art for art's sake. Art for art's sake. Art for art's sake. Money for Doc's sake.
Thanks for watching The Art Zone. If you have any suggestions, videos, or ideas, stop in at J.R. Kortman Center for Design, 107 North Main, or give us a call at 968-0123. Once again, thanks for watching The Art Zone.